You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Colorado. This is the Engage the Rockies podcast. I am your host, Jarvis Caldwell, Executive Director of Engage the Rockies. Now, if you're a regular listener, you're probably looking at my video and saying, where are you at? What did you do to the American flag and the Statue of Liberty statue that you had behind you? I am in sunny Central Florida right now. So on a little bit of vacation, but we had a guest that was available to come on this week, and I thought it was very important given that our primary election across the state was recently, and that guest today is Mr. Steve Schleiker, our El Paso County Clerk and Recorder. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Jarvis. I mean, I can't believe you reached out to me and during your vacation and pulled me out from under the desk in a fetal position, man. So,
right? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining. I figured, we want to do this as close to the election as possible when it's the most relevant.
Yeah.
And so today, what spurred the thought of having you on here, besides just the election, is I had ran into you a week or two ago, and we were talking about what you were doing at the county clerk level on cleaning up voter rolls. And so, I'd reached out to you and said, hey, let's talk about the voter roll thing. Maybe let's talk about some election integrity issues, because, that's been a very relevant topic for a few years now, especially in Colorado. And so the topic that we were talking about the other day that I think voters would really benefit from hearing is, number one, is cleaning up voter rolls. Now, I've heard from several people saying, well, I got the mail-in ballot, which is, it's state law, the universal mail-in balloting. So whether you have an opinion on that or not, that's coming from the state level, and correct me if I'm wrong. And so you're having to work within those limits that are set at the state level. And so, I do hear people complain about voter rolls, like, oh, someone who used to live in the house that I'm now living in, I got their ballot in the mail, or a number of different things here. And so you are doing something very interesting at the local level. And I'm going to let you go ahead and take it from here and explain what you decided to do recently to clean up our voter rolls.
Yeah, and Jarvis, I appreciated that conversation, because I think I was about knee deep in a big fire as I was cooking burgers and dogs for a get together. We were.
That's right.
But I'll tell you this is, I strongly feel our voter rolls is the gateway to our whole entire election process. Who can participate, who should not be participating. And when I became clerk and recorder, I brought some knowledge down the hallway from being a former county assessor of not always is the United States Postal Service information up to date or anything like that.
Right.
And I saw a number of things once I became clerk and recorder that just truly bothered me. And that was a bunch of undeliverable ballots, or people were texting or calling me going, hey, I am getting these ballots to a person who no longer lives here, or, this person has passed away, just a number of different things. So within the first month, Jarvis, I signed a contract with a company called Experian. And I'm the only clerk and recorder here in the state that has done it thus far. Right now, there are a handful of other clerk and recorders that are now doing it, and we're helping them. But here's the reason why I did this, is I recognized that everybody applies for credit. It doesn't matter if it's a home, if it's a car loan, if you're buying an engagement ring, just a number of different things. People are applying for credit, student loans, things like that. And one of the big things that is part of that application process is you have to put your primary residence down as far as on the application.
Right.
So what I ended up doing is I sent over 461,000 voter records to Experian. There was no confidential information that was shared. So it was only first name, last name, mailing address. I excluded our confidential voters, and I also excluded our military and overseas citizens that live abroad.
Right.
So 461,000 records went to Experian. And Jarvis, within 24 hours, I received the report back, which was amazing to me. So what I also got back from Experian basically there was no confidential information. I don't know Jarvis Caldwell's, his credit scores or anything like that.
Right.
But it was just basically matching up the addresses, and over 50,000 records could not be confirmed. That is 10% of our total voter database. So, as your clerk and recorder, I do not have the authority to sit there and either remove those individuals from the voter database or make them inactive. But what we ended up doing is we actually reached out to these voters. So if they had an email address on file, we emailed them. If we didn't have that, we sent them a postcard. Within 2 days, we saw a 1,500% increase of voters reaching out to us going, oh, we no longer live there. So they were removing themselves from the voter rolls. In addition to that, we saw a 500% increase of voters reaching out going, oh, I forgot to update my address. My new address is this. And the other reason why I did it, though, Jarvis, is I also recognize the fact is we have a very large voter database, the 18s to the 25 or 30-year-olds who don't even know how to address an envelope. They don't do USPS.
Right.
Everything they do is online. They do it off their phones. So I just sat there and I'm like, we got to think about this and utilize the assets that are out there. So far, over the last 3 elections, now going into our November election, I've run 2 data queries. So we just ran one here in April, preparing for the November general election. So to share with you the numbers is in the November 2023 coordinated election, this office saw over 38,000 undeliverable ballots.
Wow.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, that's a good percentage of total voters.
Yeah. Well, in Jarvis, the optics of that are where people are sitting here because everything's transparent. Is you can come in here and go, what are all these ballots sitting in these mail trays? Well, they're undeliverable. So we have gone from 38,000 to this last election that we just did, June 25th, to 11,000.
Wow.
So we have basically, decreased it by over, 300%.
Yeah.
And that's also taxpayer money because it costs a lot of money to sit there and do the ballots and things like that. We had a 99.3% basically ballot drop rate from the USPS of having good addresses, which is pretty dang good. But yeah, so I'm monitoring that, and it's something that I am going to continue to do. There are a handful of counties where Los Animas is doing it, and we assisted her down there. Her name is Carrie Apple, great clerk, so we helped her. There's another clerk that's going to be doing it. But one thing that I'm going to be doing here, Jarvis, is probably in the 2025 legislative session, is I don't know how the state of Indiana got my information, but they reached out to me and asked if I would help several clerks in Indiana because the Secretary of State there pushed for a law that all clerks have to run this data query against their voter rolls. Right. So now it's a law in Indiana that they have to use Experian to update their voter rolls as far as mailing addresses. So I've helped a couple clerks there as well.
That's amazing. And, I think something unique to El Paso County that maybe isn't as unique to most other places is the fact that we have 5 military bases in El Paso County. And the thing is a lot of military members, most of the audience probably knows that I did 10 years in the military. I think I moved 7 times. And it's like, you may move somewhere, get a driver's license there, register, and then you're gone again in a year or two. And I don't know about most, I haven't seen the actual statistics, but I imagine many people, they're more worried about their next assignment, whatever, moving on. And they're not going to the clerk and recorder's office or calling or going online and saying, please deregister me from your voting rolls. Right.
That's correct.
They get their orders, they're shopping for a new house somewhere else and they're moving on. And that's probably the last thing on their list. So I can imagine that in El Paso County, that is a very big issue. And maybe why we see the numbers that we do as far as undeliverables and things like that.
Yeah, and Jarvis, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. Is we're the most unique county in the whole entire state. Right. And one of the reasons why is, because we got the 5 major military installations. And a lot of our military members, they may be here for 1 or 2 general elections.
Right.
and, get stationed someplace else. I too spent 11 years in the Marines.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could tell you is every 2 or 3 years, I was going someplace else. I never
Right.
unpacked.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made moving easy because you had your boxes of stuff, and
Yep.
you would just put them in a garage or storage facility or whatever. And then 2 years later, you're moving again. Half of your house is already packed, and so
Yep.
you just move on. I learned to be very mobile in the military, especially moving. I think
Yep.
it was 6 or 7 times in 10 years. Um, so that's great. Yeah, I mean, I would love to do, or I would love to see maybe the Secretary of State take on something like this, and the thing you did with Experian, and make that go across the state. Because I mean, the reality is, when we talk about election integrity and stuff like that, we can have all the election integrity in the world at the county level, but you want to see it statewide, because we're also voting on U.S. senators and
Yep.
the governor and other people. So the most election integrity across the state possible is I think kind of the best situation, right?
Well, Jarvis, if you're starting to think like Steve Schleicher, you need some counseling, man. So I'll wait for the invoice.
That's right.
So as I was sharing in 2025,
Mhm.
what I would like to do is I'm going to team up with some of our local legislators
Mm,
who actually think this is a good idea.
yeah.
And one of the things is you're absolutely right. This should be done by the Secretary of State's office, not by
Right.
your county clerk and recorder. And the
Mhm.
reason why I say that is because my budget is much different than, say, Pueblo County or Montezuma County or Gilpin County.
Right.
The other thing is I also have the assets where I have, individuals that are good, great database administrators. They
Mhm.
understand this, where in some of our rural counties, they don't have that.
Right.
So this should be a Secretary of State thing.
Yeah.
So what I'm looking at is running legislation in 2025 to
Mhm.
where the Secretary of State does this, prior to each and every election. And there's some
Mhm.
timing there. But the other thing that I also want to utilize as well is the state jury commission data, because this database actually contains all of our green card holders and also our illegal aliens, because we
Right.
know if you're a green card holder or an illegal alien, you cannot serve on a jury.
Right.
So this is just another data set that I feel just to ensure that our voter rolls are, up to speed, and our voters here in town are going, man, at least our clerks are, trying to make sure that whoever's eligible is eligible to vote. Those who are not are not.
Yeah.
Um,
No, that sounds great. And actually, you gave me an idea about something to talk about here in a minute that we'll get to, and that's kind of, I hate to call them conspiracies, but we'll talk about election integrity questions.
yeah,
Before I get to that, I want to give you a chance to highlight a feature that you and I also talked about at that barbecue called the EPC VIP. I used it just tracking different elections around El Paso County, and so I want to give you a quick minute to talk about that, because if for our listeners who are listening to this who haven't used that VIP feature, I mean, it's pretty incredible. So please.
no, Jarvis, thanks, man. Because
Mhm.
to me, education and transparency is huge, at least in government, and especially it is critical in elections.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing is when I was county assessor, I revamped the whole entire website on the property ownership piece. And I worked with a company and built a fantastic relationship with them, where
Mhm.
when I left, that website was getting over 49 million hits a year.
Oh,
When I
wow.
came down, here to the clerk and recorder's office, of course, I brought relationships and, just a number of different things. But my first question is, where is a GIS platform? Do we put this information out there? Because when candidates or campaigns or even citizens, when they do a core request or want reports, they're
Mhm.
tired of seeing Excel spreadsheets. They don't want to see columns and rows.
Right.
So I reached out to my contacts at the company that helped me in the assessor's office. And this is the first time in the entire nation that this company was like, Steve, I think we may be onto something here. We will help you with your elections.
Yeah.
So what we did is we developed a GIS platform where you could look at historical election data. You could look at a current. It is updated live, where you could
Mhm.
look at voter registration, voter turnout, where you could sit there and look by each precinct, the number of ballots cast. And it also breaks it down by male, female, years of birth, things like that.
Yeah.
But to me, this is something that I feel that the citizens have been wanting. And
Mhm.
I think it's going to be a very popular asset for the November 2024 general election, where folks are going to be sitting there going, wow, we're starting to see a lot of turnout. But it basically turns into a heat map where you can see different areas where the turnout
Mhm.
is, above 50% or so. But to me, it was something. Transparency and education is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for those who are unfamiliar with the program, you can find it on the Clerk and Recorder's website for El Paso County. And it's I think you guys have it titled EPC VIP. But
Yep.
when you click it on there, you can break it down to different races. So you can go to county commissioners, state house, state senate, and I think congressional. There's a bunch of different options on there, and it'll give you a map of El Paso County, and you can break it down by the precincts, and you can see in real time, basically in real time. You guys update it, I think, every morning at 10 a.m. or something.
Yep.
And so you could go in there and look. Okay, there's been 1,500 Republicans that voted in this race. There's been 800 Democrats that voted. There's been X amount of unaffiliateds. It'll give you the median age of the people who voted for each party. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And I'm like, it kind of, it's reminiscent of when you watch like national news during a presidential cycle, right? And they're looking at a swing state or something like that, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, so we have the state, and they zoom in on it, and it's like, here's the counties, and here's the way it's breaking for this person or that person. I mean, it's very interactive. It's very modern, like you said, because it drives me crazy when you go and it's like an Excel spreadsheet, and then you have to like
Yep.
control F to try to find percentages. No, this is like an actual map that you can zoom in on, zoom out of, breaks it down by precincts or districts, and you just hover your mouse over it, and then it gives you the statistics for it. And I'm like, this is amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
In Jarvis, the other thing though too is, you can put in your property address, and it will
Hmm.
pull up the nearest ballot box and or the voter service polling center that's nearest to you.
Oh wow.
The other
Yep.
thing is when you sit there and if say you want to go ahead and hit the nearest ballot box to where you live,
Mm.
is it would also pull up the new camera system where you can actually look and watch that camera, or
Yeah.
all 39 cameras if you want,
Yeah.
during a live election.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good segue into our last part here of the conversation. So, I want to call this, election integrity issues, and I'll bring up some topics that I hear a lot when I'm talking with different people. And the voter rolls is a big one, and I think I wouldn't call that a conspiracy. I mean, that's a legitimate concern about, hey, we need to clean up voter rolls. We don't want,
Yep.
ballots going out into mailboxes that to people who aren't allowed to vote, right? And so that's a part of the election integrity. The thing that you just brought up, which is ballot drop boxes, and this is something that I think most people probably don't know, is that you guys have cameras on all of our ballot drop boxes. There's 39 of them, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken, and they're live streamed, and that's something that's new. And
Yep.
feel free to talk about that.
Yeah, Jarvis, when I came down, my very first week, I recognized, we did not have that ability.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of folks when I was campaigning to be clerk and recorder that kept on bringing up this movie that was put out there in regards to ballot harvesting and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, but I just sat there and I'm going, you know what? Okay, I don't feel that that's an issue here in El Paso County.
Right.
But the thing is, what a lot of people don't understand is when you start talking about, conspiracies, things like that. I'm like, guys, I'm the El Paso County clerk and recorder. I'm going to do my best what I can do here and
Mm-hmm.
be an influence here in the state of Colorado. But a lot of things that you're talking about are Pennsylvania, Georgia, things like that.
Yeah.
And what a lot of folks, Jarvis, don't understand is they think that everything should be templated, where if this state is doing this, then this state should do it. Well, that's not the way our Constitution is. We're states'
Right.
rights. And
Yeah.
we all have different constitutions, and the way they run the elections is different.
Right.
But what I ended up doing is basically there were a number of things as citizens were basically, doing an open records request, a citizen's open record request for all the video footage throughout the election. This would cost thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
It would take a lot of time for my public information officer, the county attorney, myself to download this footage, a terabyte hard drive, if not numerous ones, because people
Yeah.
wanted that footage. The system was extremely archaic. You needed to have electrical power, just a number of things. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, we're done. We could do better.
Mhm.
So one thing that I went ahead and did is said, you know what? I want it to be able to be electrical, solar, and the data is stored in the cloud for up to a period of 10 years, where our statutory requirement is 25 months. So we
Mhm.
surpass that dramatically. But what we have done, again, the first in the state, we live stream it to every citizen in the whole entire um, state. If anybody in the state wants to look at it, they just have to go to the link, but at least the citizens in El Paso County can
Right.
live stream this and take a look. But one of the things, though, Jarvis, is since we've implemented this system, we have received zero core requests.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's no excuse to, or no reason
Yeah.
to, right? If you already have access to it. And the documentary you're referring to, which focuses heavily on the ballot drop boxes. I think one of the things when I watched it, I noticed that, a lot of times people requested that they get the footage, and for technical issues or whatever, a lot of that footage couldn't be obtained by citizens. So I think you're really doing a great job there, as far as just, you're like, well, we're just going to bypass that and just give you the footage
Yeah.
24/7 essentially. And then you don't have to worry about us losing the footage or anything like that. It's already
Yeah.
available.
Well,
Yep.
in Jarvis, the
That's a
other
big
thing
one.
is we never
Mhm.
knew. Yeah, we never knew if the camera system was down. My staff had to go out to all 39 boxes each and every day to make sure
Oh,
the
wow.
Wi-Fi was still there. Blah blah blah. But we
Yeah.
changed up that whole entire system, and now the way the system is we actually get alerts anytime. Something basically they're very sensitive and it picks up everything. So
Nice.
within the first day, I get an alert about 11 o'clock at night, and it was from our Bear Creek
Hmm.
ballot box. And I'm like, what the heck is this? What's going on? So I pull it up, and it was a moth flying by the camera, but it wasn't the moth that set the camera off. It was a bat that was underneath the ballot box, came up and ate the moth. So I saved that video. It's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, but it's one of those things where now they know, and
Uh,
the media knows that the cameras are out there. And
mhm.
so as we're watching, they're waving at Steve or my deputy or anything
Right, right.
like that. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
funny. Yeah. Well, I didn't realize that. So next time I'll make sure that I wave at you. Next time I pull up there, I'll
Yeah.
make a sign or something. Okay. I want to respect your time here. So just a couple more minutes. Uh, Going back to one of the concerns, is connected to internet.
Yep.
A lot of people are worried that, a hostile actor, whether domestic or foreign, can hack into our voting machines and then, change votes or delete things, add things. So what is kind of your position on that you want people to know?
Jarvis, I will tell you, not in El Paso County.
Mm,
And here's the reason why. I swapped out everything. So
yeah.
any of our tabulation equipment that we have, and we know there's certain items that have to be included in your system to be able to attach to the internet, connect to the internet.
Hmm.
ISP, modem, network interface card, you name it. Well, our stuff here has none of that. So it is completely, it removes, there is no ISP, no modem, no network interface card, none of that stuff. The other thing that we took care of is because, debate came up about, hey, what about a thumb drive or jump drives?
Hmm.
Well, we now have port locks. So in every one of our CPUs is where we have a port lock where you cannot gain access to that port unless you snap it. In addition, is that CPU is also in a locked cage. So
Mm.
each one has its own cage right there at the tabulation station. So not only can you not access it via the internet, they have port locks so nobody can put a jump drive, thumb drive, and they're also locked in a steel cage. And all of this, there's one person that has the keys to the house, and it's not Steve Schleiker.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yep.
that's another good point, because I'm sure some people probably assume, well, Steve, you're an elected Republican, you're partisan, and you have friends who are running for office and things like that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have this on the list, but if is there any kind of concern or rumor you want to dispel that somehow election results as they're coming in weeks in advance and like you're sharing that information or something like that?
Jarvis, not at all. In fact, one of the things is to remove that, because my job as clerk and recorder is to be like the umpire. I call the balls and strikes. I don't play partisan politics as the clerk and recorder. I'm here to run a fair and secure election. So I do not know results until we push out our very first election night results. So I have no idea about that. The other thing is anytime I go into these rooms, if it be the tabulation room or if I go into the signature verification room, I, as the elected official, am escorted. So I have another person that is with me where I have to sign in and things like that. And also all of this is under 24/7 security camera.
Right.
So Jarvis, the only thing that I share with the public is total amount of ballots that have been returned.
Right.
And during a primary, I do break it down by Democrat, Republican, and unaffiliated. But, I just sit there and just say, hey, this is where the parties are coming in on their primary. And I provide those stats each and every day. But who the citizens vote for, have no idea until we do the 7:30 push on election night reporting.
Yeah, and that's probably an important distinction, because when we were talking about the EPC VIP feature, it doesn't actually show you like during the election when ballots are still being turned in over that 3 or 4 week period there. It'll show you how many Republicans voted in this district or this precinct or whatever, and how many Democrats did as well. But it doesn't actually show you like, a certain percentage for this candidate, a certain percentage for that candidate. It doesn't break it down into that. So that's an important distinction to make about that feature.
Yeah, well, in Jarvis, we're going to go ahead and do that once.
Yeah.
And the thing is, though, to me, for historical elections, is once we certify and we canvass and everything is done with an election, that's when we'll go ahead and put that detail into there. But when you're running a live election, things like that. But one thing you will also note is during a primary, I also didn't break down how many unaffiliated chose the Republican ballot or the ones that chose the Democrat ballot. Right. Because you don't want to sit there and, share that information out there. But I too didn't even know what the breakdown was until 2 days after election day of the percentage of unaffiliated that chose the Republican or chose the Democrat ballot.
Yeah. Do you know that percentage off the top of your head?
So over 60% of the unaffiliated chose the Republican ballot.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Very interesting.
And a lot of our unaffiliated, they do lean right. But Jarvis, I think the reason why a lot of the unaffiliated did that, we were the only ones that had contested races. The Democrats did not.
That's right.
They only had a couple contested races, which was Congressional District 5 and Congressional District 4. Everything else was, one candidate. So
yeah, that makes sense. Okay, last question for you. Algorithms. Yeah, I get this one the most. I would say the connected to the internet and the algorithms are changing votes and things like that. And because I hear different people say, well, that's why we have to have a great turnout, because we'll overload the system and then the algorithm can't handle it. And I'm saying, so what you're saying is in order to win, you just need to turn out and vote more. Like, that's an interesting idea. Right. And I always kind of find it a little funny, because when I think about, overloading a system and the algorithm can't handle it, I'm like, well, if the algorithm is the way that you're saying it is, where it's just simple, for every 4 votes for this person, it changes 1 vote or something. And I'm like, I don't think you're going to overload a computer system by having an extra 5,000 people turn out or 10,000. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to algorithms, they're pretty simple. And we're at the stage in technology where we can have satellites and put, rovers on Mars. So I don't think you're going to, outdo an algorithm that way. But please feel free to speak to that process when it comes to that.
Yeah, and Jarvis, I'm glad you asked that question because that's something I probably talk to each and every week.
Hmm.
And what I want to share to start off with is let's remember that we have several hundred each election of election judges who are our family members or they're
Hmm.
our neighbors and friends that step up and basically say, you know what, I'm going to go serve as an election judge.
Yeah.
These are the individuals that actually conduct the elections. They are the
Hmm.
ones, they're bipartisan teams, Democrats, unaffiliated, and Republicans that are in here doing all of this. So for the general election, I'm going to hire over 800 election judges to assist us in this one. But Jarvis, I will tell you is one of which is if anybody has any questions and want to talk about algorithms, the first thing I'm going to do is sit down with them and put them through and go through a logic and accuracy test with them.
Right.
This is basically an audit test that we have to perform on the machines prior to each and every election. It's a three-step process. One of which is your hardware working? Can you turn this stuff on? Blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
Keep in mind, this is still bipartisan teams that are in here doing it, not
Right.
elections full-time staff or Steve Schleiker, clerk and recorder.
Hmm.
Then what we end up doing is we have basically a deck of test ballots that's provided by the Secretary of State
Okay.
with a known election result. So
Right.
we basically go through these ballots, and after we get done tabulating those ballots, we should come to that exact result.
Hmm.
So if you don't, then basically, something's not correct,
Something's
something's
wrong.
going
Right.
on. But each and every time we have come to 100% compliance. But Jarvis, here's the other thing that we do is those bipartisan teams, those judges, we hand them 25 ballots and we tell them, mark them up, vote them
Yeah.
any way you want. So you have probably several hundred ballots that they mark up, they vote any which way they want. We
Hmm.
tabulate those, and then we sit there and we get a report. Then after that, Jarvis, we hand count those ballots.
Hmm.
So what then is we match up the tabulation report to the hand count, and it has to match perfectly. If it
Right.
does not, you cannot move forward with an election.
Right.
So it's a very important process, but I will tell you, it's time consuming
Hmm.
because there are times where on the hand count, and keep in mind, we're only talking several hundred ballots. It
Right.
takes them several hours, and the last time it took them 7 attempts.
Wow. 7 attempts. Well, yeah, I mean, and I want to respect your time, but an important thing that people should look into is when you talk about hand counting ballots, it's like
Yeah,
you're leaving it in the hands of someone that you don't know who may not even be good at counting. And
yeah,
there are studies out there that show that especially when you're counting a large number, that inaccuracies by hand counting are far more than doing it through a machine that's went through the testing and things like that. Especially when you consider with just our local elections, you'll get a ballot and maybe you live in Colorado Springs, but you're unincorporated, so you don't have a vote for city council. And then
yep,
maybe you're voting for 3 school board members. And then you're also voting for county commissioner and state house and state senate and then U.S. congressional, then U.S. Senate. And it's like, but somebody can live just a few blocks away, but they live in a different line, a
yeah,
different map, for whatever. And then their ballot is very different. There'll be some overlap, but it may be very different. And it's like, but everybody's dropping at the same drop box. And it's like the idea of counting that accurately by hand when you have, hundreds of thousands of people voting in the county with so many ballots being uniquely different and having to
yeah.
tabulate that and track. And it's like, that seems like a nightmare. You will not have election results
No,
on the night of the election, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 months. And it's untelling how much money you'll spend to sit there and go back and redo it because you came up
yeah.
wrong,
Well, in Jarvis, let me give you a really good example.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about we were asked by our county chairwoman to come down
Mm-hmm.
and conduct the election for our last GOP Central Committee meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, absolutely, we'll come on down there and help you out and things like that. But when it came down to basically counting the votes for bonus members and things like that, So you're thinking when at the central committee, you're sitting there talking about 300 ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we're sitting here going through, we actually hand counted those. It took us from 3:30 in the afternoon, and then we got kicked out of the high school there at Vista Ridge because they closed the doors, and
Right.
we went to an IHOP. So we gathered up all of the election information, locked everything up,
Yeah.
and there was a number of volunteers. But Jarvis, I will tell you this: out of all those folks that were there,
Mm-hmm.
there was only 7 or 8 people that said we'll help count. Everybody
Right.
else left.
Yeah.
So we ended up going to IHOP, and it took us from 3:30 till 11 o'clock at night to
Wow.
count 300 ballots for the bonus members. And we sat there and caught a number, I and my staff caught a number of mistakes that were being made by folks that were helping us out because they were, one, getting tired.
Right.
They weren't listening.
Yeah.
We're counting votes for certain people, but there was a number of mistakes where they were putting check marks in the wrong one. But that is human error.
Right.
And
Right.
that's exactly what it is. But one thing you're absolutely right about is, again, what makes El Paso County more unique is not only the 5 military installations, is we got 17 different school districts,
Yeah.
where most
Right.
counties only have one.
Right.
And you could be voting in school district 38. I'm voting in school district 11, and our ballots are completely different.
Right. Yeah. And I tell people that I go, okay, let's just say there was 150,000 people in El Paso County that voted. I don't know what the real numbers are, but I know that's depending on if it's a general or primary, and if it's a presidential year, it's probably much more than that. So just say you have 150,000 people that are voting, and they all have ballots. I mean, I've gotten ballots where you have 10 judges on there, and you have all these ballot initiatives, and then you have U.S. Senate and Congress and governor and Secretary of State. You have all these. You might have 30 different selections on one ballot, and you're timesing that 30 selections by the 150,000 people that vote. And it'll be a little different, but I mean, when you do that, you're like, there's probably technically millions of selections being made. And you're gonna have people hand count millions of selections being made across the whole county, and it's like, and you think that's going to be more accurate than a machine that you've ran a bunch of tests on, and so it's accurate.
Definitely not. I mean, in Jarvis, I'm being told by our Secretary of State that El Paso County will probably have a 3-card ballot this November because of all the different initiatives. Where, I mean, they're out there trying to get signatures for a number of different things. If it deals with property tax or ranked choice voting. So we're probably going to be looking at a 3-card ballot. But you're absolutely right, is when you're sitting here looking at all this stuff, and also the argument is, well, let's do it at the precinct level. Where are you going to find all of these volunteers? Because I sit here and try to hire 250 judges to help with a primary. Now I'm having to hire 800 for the general. It is extremely difficult. But when you ask people to step up, like at the Central Committee meeting, they did not.
No.
So
I don't disagree with you there, Mr. Clerk.
But Jarvis, I will tell you is I could not be more proud of the group here in the Clerk and Recorder's office, because I came down here and I said, you know what, guys, there's 3 things we need to concentrate on. One is be proud.
Yeah.
Be loud, because I felt that their voice was taken away, by a small minority group. And I also said, be the leader, because I said, no, we're not going to do what this county does or this county does. Is they're going to sit there and go, what is El Paso doing? We need to follow them. Right. And in a matter of 19 months, Jarvis, this group here has basically reshifted everything in the office, where a number of folks throughout the community, it doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, because our election doesn't have any affiliation. They are extremely happy with the changes being made here. And this gang has done a stand-up job.
Well, we're all very thankful for it. Somebody had asked me a while back about, election integrity stuff. And I said, I think everybody wants election integrity,
Yeah.
especially, people, you're an elected official. It's like, of course you want election integrity. You have to run for office. Like,
Yeah.
of course you want to be, believe in the system. And I think everybody does. Cause if you don't have confidence in your election system, I mean, you don't have much, because when you don't trust the outcome of an election, that's where it gets ugly, historically in different countries and other places. So yeah, it's very important. We ran way over our time. I know I told you over the phone maybe 20 minutes, and now we're at 40. So I want to respect your time, sir. I appreciate it very much. For those who want to know where they can find EPC VIP and just other information about your office, can you give us the website for it?
Yeah, so Jarvis, they can sit there and go to elpasoco.com, go to the clerk and recorders and hit elections, and you're right there.
Okay, excellent. Awesome. And we'll put a link to it in our show notes here when
Thanks,
we
buddy.
release this episode. Thank you so much, sir, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jarvis.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.